May the peace of Christ be with you. Did you know that Christians are commanded to hate? Only twice in the whole New Testament are Christians commanded to hate. The first one doesn't really count because it's hyperbole. Hyperbole is when you make an overstatement, right? You don't say, oh, our team won on Friday night. You say, we killed them. No one died. It's hyperbole, right? It's overstatement for emphasis. So Jesus would tell his disciples, if you don't hate your own life, if you don't hate your father and mother, if you don't hate your brother and sister, your spouse, if you don't hate them, you are not fit to be my disciple. His point wasn't to hate your spouse. His point was your love for the Lord should be so great that anything else by comparison would seem like hate. It's overstatement. It's hyperbole. Okay, so that's when Jesus says hate your spouse, he doesn't mean hate your spouse. He means love your spouse, but don't love them as much as you love God. So the first command to hate doesn't really count. The second command to hate really does. And it can be found in Romans chapter 12, verse 9. This is the one time Christians are told to hate. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Strong language. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. I went ahead and I did my nerd thing and I started looking at the scripture in the original languages because I was curious. And I felt like you read the word hate throughout the New Testament a lot, not in a command format, but in a warning format. The world is going to hate you because of me. Do not be afraid if the world hates you because it hated me first. The word hate is throughout. Christians aren't commanded to hate, but we recognize there's a lot of hate in the world. Is that the same word in Greek that gets used everywhere else in the New Testament? No. This word is only used once in the entire Bible. It's not even in the Greek Old Testament. Apostageo is the word. Apostageo. And here's what it means. It's more than hate. It takes it a step further. It's a visceral reaction. It's disgust. It's to abhor. It's to dislike. It's to have a horror of. It's to hate something so much it disgusts you. Apostageo is not a soft term. So the question I want to ask you is, what truly disgusts you? Because that is how you are supposed to feel about anything that's evil. Think about something that truly disgusts you. I'm not talking about something that annoys you or something that you don't like. Yes, you don't like the Packers. That's fine. But I doubt they disgust you. Maybe the Cowboys. But what causes a visceral, emotional reaction in your soul? What makes you instinctively want to push something away from you and turn up your nose? What makes you gag? For me? Oh. So, here's the thing. Those of you who watch the news know that the TikTok ban started today, right?
Yep, actually it started last night.
Last night, thank you very much. You know where I got this image from? TikTok. This is why TikTok is banned. Whoever made hot dog Jell-O, I don't know who you are, but I'm pretty sure you're in Al-Qaeda. This is disgusting. Like, this is so bad for me, because as my friends know, there are only two things I really, in terms of food, I'll eat just about anything. There are two things, though, I can't do. Number one is Jell-O. Number two is?
Olives.
Thank you, my friends. I hate olives. And I hate Jell-O. I hate anything gelatinous. So if this also had olives in it, double whammy, right? This is disgusting. It's so bad that when I downloaded it onto my computer and I had it in my little downloads tab, I had to download a bunch of images for the class that I teach on Sunday mornings. A whole bunch of images to use in my slideshow. And every time I downloaded an image, I would see that picture of that hot dog Jell-O sitting in my downloads folder. I couldn't handle it. I had to delete it. It disgusted me so much I was retching at my desk. Who does this? My friends. That is apostageo. Do we understand what we mean by the term? It is to abhor. It is to hate with disgust. So let me ask a question. How much do you hate evil? Does evil truly disgust you? Do you hate it as much as I hate hot dog Jell-O? Now, I want to be clear. When I ask about hating evil, we have to be careful because it's really easy for folks to then make the transition from I hate evil, people are evil, there are people that I hate. No. The Christian is never commanded to hate people under any circumstance. As a matter of fact, Jesus teaches us to love our enemies, to be good to those who hate us, to bless those who curse us, and to pray for those who mistreat us. If someone slaps us on the cheek, we're supposed to turn the other one. If someone steals our cloak, we're supposed to give them our shirt as well. If someone makes us go 1 mile with them, we're supposed to go 2. We overcome evil with good. We do not hate people. But actions and attitudes that are evil should disgust the Christian. How much evil are you willing to stomach in your life? How much are you willing to ignore? What temptations do you slide under the rug and just pretend aren't there? Let me ask the question a different way. And I thought about doing this, and then I decided it was too mean. If I were to bring up a glass of water and offer it to you, Rick, would you take a glass of water from me? Yeah, you trust me, right? What if I spit in it first? Tom, if I offered you a glass of water, but then I spit in it, would you take it? No. It's just a little spit. What if it's just a tiny bit? Just a drop. Why? It's disgusting. If we won't allow that little bit of spit into a cup of water, why on earth would we allow a little bit of evil into our lives? It's even more polluting. So let me ask, what risks are you willing to take to purge evil from your household? To purge it from your life? Not people. Evil actions, evil attitudes, evil ideas. What are you willing to sacrifice? Because when it comes to evil, God doesn't mess around. In this series, we're talking about the book of Deuteronomy, and I just want to remind you real quick what the book of Deuteronomy is all about. The book of Deuteronomy is Moses' farewell address. So Moses was raised up to lead the Jews out of Egypt. The Jews were imprisoned there. They were being treated as slaves, working to build Pharaoh's pyramids, right? So we have the whole story of the Passover, the 10 plagues of Egypt, the people going through the Red Sea and coming out on the other side. They go into the wilderness. They receive God's covenant. They seem like they're going to be doing okay. Then the second Moses turns his back, they go and they build a golden calf. And this pattern of faithlessness, this pattern of sin, this pattern of embracing evil, it became typical for the Jews in the wilderness. And so Moses is leading a very stiff-necked, very stubborn people. They get so bad, God talks about wiping them off the map and just starting from scratch with Moses. Because God doesn't mess around when it comes to evil. Ultimately, the punishment that they suffer is that they will never get to enter the promised land which God has promised to the Jewish people. Moses' whole thing was he was supposed to lead them out of Egypt, have a little vacation in the desert, and then go into the promised land. That was the plan. Israel dug their heels in and said, we want to die in the desert. And God said, fine, you're going to die in the desert. I will raise up the next generation, and they will go into the promised land. And Moses will lead them until Moses started doing the same kinds of things that his people were doing. He placed himself on par with God. He said, when he was standing in front of a rock and the people needed water and they came to Moses complaining about water, what did Moses say? Did he say, must God draw water from this rock for you? No, he said, must we draw water from this rock for you? Moses thought he was just as important as God. And at a critical moment, and because of that failure, God said, come on, Moses. You are so much, what were you thinking? You know what? You're going to die in the desert too. I'm going to start I'm just full reboot. We're going to start from scratch. And Moses pleads, and God says, no. So, God decides to give Moses one final gift. He says, I'll let you see the promised land. You can go up on Mount Nebo. You can see where the next generation is going to go. And then on top of Mount Nebo, you're going to die. And so Moses says, I need to give the Israelites, this new generation, now that the wicked generation has died out, this new generation, which will be led by my servant Joshua, into the promised land. I need to instruct them. I need to warn them to do better than their ancestors did. Don't repeat their mistakes. Don't become like the Canaanites. Purge the evil from among you. Don't allow even one drop of spit into the glass, because if you do, the consequences will be catastrophic. I know because I'm living it. He gives a passionate address trying to tell this new generation how to live, using the last generation as an example of failure. And that's what Deuteronomy is all about. So last week when we were talking about Deuteronomy, we talked about fearing the Lord, which is a very big theme in the first 11 chapters of Deuteronomy. And when we talk about fear, we're not talking about awful terror, but having respect for the power, reverence, and sovereignty of God. So, where we pick up the story today, as the Israelites prepare to enter the promised land, Moses does seem worried. He does seem a little on edge because he fears that the next generation is going to emulate the faith and practices of the Canaanites. The Canaanites were not just another religion. What the Canaanites believed, what they did, was profoundly evil. Scripture teaches us not only would the worship of Baal or Ashtoreth or one of the other Canaanite gods be an exercise in futility because you're praying to something that doesn't exist, it would be a betrayal of the God of their forefathers who brought them out of Egypt. And even more than that, Canaanite faith practice included prostitution, self-mutilation, blood magic, sorcery, necromancy, that's playing with dead things, and child sacrifice. It was a common practice in ancient Canaan to murder your children and give them to the gods. They believed that sacrificing a child could bring about a good harvest, or that it would protect a new shrine or temple. And so, we can see the Canaanite religion would not only be a betrayal of God, but it opened the door for the devil and his minions to lead and guide God's people through pain, sensuality, drunkenness, and death. And so Moses gives these instructions to the next generation. Found in Deuteronomy chapter 12, beginning in verse 2. We're going to go through 5, and then 31 and 32. Destroy completely all the places on the high mountains. This is where the Canaanites worshipped. On the hills and under every spreading tree. That's where they did their prostitution. Where the nations you are dispossessing worship their gods, break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, and burn their Asherah poles in the fire, cut down the idols of their gods, and wipe out their names from those places. You must not worship the Lord your God in their way. But you are to seek the place the Lord your God will choose from among all your tribes to put his name there for his dwelling. To that place you must go. You must not worship the Lord your God in their way. Because in worshiping their gods, they do all kinds of detestable, disgusting things the Lord hates. They even burn their sons and daughters in the fire as sacrifices to their gods. As you continue to read in Deuteronomy, there's a key phrase that emerges over the next 10 chapters. You must purge the evil from among you. You must Purge the evil from among you. Be so disgusted by evil that you have to act when you see it in your midst. You see someone trying to sacrifice their kid, you interrupt them. You must purge it from the land. And so when it came to evil, God didn't mess around in Israel, nor did Moses. There were a number of laws about what you should do if this kind of evil showed up. And I'll skip to the punchline. The consequence was usually the same. If you found prophets who were intentionally misleading people away from God and to the Canaanite gods, you were to execute them. If you found that a Jewish village had turned to pagan worship of Baal and Ashtoreth, execute the village. If you found people practicing the occult, execute them. If you found murderers, kill them. If you found people who lied in court, perjury, and false witnesses, execute them. If you had a child who was exceptionally rebellious, we're not talking about when Richard mouths off to Darren. We are talking about trying to dismantle the household and cause great disorder in the community. A rebellious son, execute him. If you commit adultery, you cheat on your spouse, execute them. When we read those examples, we get very quiet. Because the punishment of death feels extreme. The reason Moses communicated these laws in such harsh terms was that God wanted Israel to understand what evil is. Evil is truly disgusting. It's destructive. It's a cancer. It eats people from the inside out. It leads to death. In Deuteronomy 13 and 11, Moses explains the motivation for why these laws were so harsh. Then all Israel will hear and be afraid, and no one among you will do such an evil thing again. It's meant to set an example. It was meant to inspire the whole nation to hate evil and turn to good. Unfortunately, Moses' warning was not heeded. And that kind of fear, that kind of reverence seemed to never take hold in Israel. They got too comfortable with evil, and not only did they tolerate it, they embraced it. Even their kings embraced it. And they became just like the Canaanites. And so, just as Moses predicted in Deuteronomy, God's judgment ultimately came. The Jewish people lost their homeland. They were ejected from the promised land. They were sent to live in Babylon as exiles, just like they were back in Egypt. 70 years in a foreign land would be pretty rough. Then, a few hundred years later, Jesus came along. And Jesus was soft, right? Jesus viewed these sins and said, no big deal. I understand. No, that's not actually what Jesus said. Now, he didn't go around executing people. Fair point. This is good. He showed mercy. When a lawbreaker repented, whatever their sin was, adultery, idolatry, rebellion, deceit, murder, John 3, 16 and 17 becomes very real. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Because Jesus came, he lived, he died, he rescues us from that punishment which is merited. And that's why we show grace today. That's why we show mercy today. That's why if we were to discover here in the church that someone had committed adultery, we wouldn't drag you out in the parking lot and beat you to death with rocks. Thanks be to God. But Jesus didn't execute anybody. But we live in a time of grace and mercy. But Jesus warned them. When he came and he spoke the truth, he said, no one can serve two masters. Now here he was talking about money, but the lesson applies beyond money. It applies to anything else that would come between you and God. No one can serve two masters. Either you're going to hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and money. I'll put it this way, you can't serve both God and evil. Any amount of evil is disgusting. Evil so disgusted Jesus that he died to purge us of it. And he instructed us to take dramatic measures when necessary to preserve ourselves, like an 18th century army medic taking the whole leg to prevent the spread of gangrene. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, again, this is hyperbole. Please do not pull out forks and machetes and start hacking yourselves up. That's a Canaanite thing to do. This is hyperbole, illustrative language. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Y'all know what evil is. That's evil. But there are other things that happen in our lives that we know are evil. Things we know that we are responsible for, things we brush under the rug when we should feel disgust. We can't embrace that. We have to purge the evil that is going on in our lives. Again, not people. I'm not calling for a purge of people. But of evil influences, of things that drag you away from God, of things that make you a worse person, of things that we say, oh, God will understand, of things we say, well, nobody's perfect, and we don't push, we don't have that active effort of trying to remove bad things from our lives. Addictions, shortcomings, violence, deceit, sexual depravity, whatever it is, gossip, overeating, overindulging in anything that we say God understands. When you make a promise and then you don't keep it, you don't let your yes be yes and your no be no. When someone sins against you and you refuse to forgive them, even though Jesus commanded, if you've been forgiven, you better forgive. And by the way, I'm going to stick that in the Lord's Prayer so it reminds you every time you pray it. Forgive us our trespasses as we have forgiven those who trespass against us. If you're not forgiving, that should be a chilling statement. Pastor Ryan, it's not that big of a deal. It's just one little thing. It's just one relationship. It's just one. How much spit do you want in the cup? If a kid pees in the pool, are you going to jump in? Probably not. It's just one kid. Yeah, but even a little bit is too much. Okay, so there are things that I know I shouldn't be doing, but what about the gray areas? What about things I'm not certain of? Like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. Well, in regard to that, I would point you to the words of Paul and James. In Romans 12:2, Paul says, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Just because the world says it's right doesn't mean it's right. You should allow your mind, your conscience, your judgment to continually be renewed by Christ and what he is calling you to do and what he's calling you to be. Then you'll be able to understand what God's will is, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Likewise, in James says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Man, we hate that one. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature. Maturity takes time. It takes intention. It takes development. And complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, if you're dealing with something and you're not sure if it's good or it's bad, if any of you lacks wisdom, ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. God will help you to understand what the good is. God will help you understand what the bad is. Then you just have to have the boldness to actually follow up. To actually say, okay, God, you revealed this thing in my life that's not pleasing to you. I'm going to eject it. I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to change. Change is hard. Change hurts. Sometimes God calls you to throw out the gray things. They're not even black and white. But it might lead you away. Not worth it. Not one iota. Not one little bit. I like this quote from Susanna Wesley. Susanna Wesley was the mother of John and Charles Wesley. Charles Wesley, the great hymn writer, John Wesley, the great preacher, who is one of the short version. He's a muckety-muck that is involved ultimately in the planting of the Church of the Nazarene. He's kind of a big deal. Susanna Wesley was central in educating and raising her sons. Her spiritual influence was incredible. It had a great level of authority in their lives. And she said this to her son John in a letter, because there are things you're not sure if they're good or bad. There are things that the Bible didn't address because they didn't exist yet. There were no tablets. Well, there were tablets, but they weren't electronic. They were just bits of clay. It was really different. But the influences, the temptations, things like that were kind of different. So what do you do in a new modern age where there are new things and I'm not sure if the new thing is good or bad? Susanna Wesley said this: take this rule. Whatever weakens your reason, impairs the tenderness of your conscience, obscures your sense of God, or takes off your relish of spiritual things. In short, whatever increases the strength and authority of your body over your mind, that thing is sin to you, however innocent it may be in itself. Brilliant statement. By the way, she stole it from Paul. I like the way she said it, though. Paul said that you shouldn't allow any stumbling block to get in the way of yourself or your brother, right? Like Moses, I sometimes find myself viewing our society and finding myself getting a little nervous. And when I say society, I'm not talking about American society, the world society. I'm talking about Christian society. The people who are supposed to be shaped and formed by Christ. Seeing the things they not only allow to come into their lives, but encourage others to do the same. Somebody made an illustration. I hadn't heard about this, but someone made an illustration in our small group this morning. Bethel Church, which had been a really big deal for a long time. They're a massive mega church. They're known for bringing a lot of great music and that kind of thing. They also err on the charismatic, supernatural side of things. Apparently, they got busted recently because people are using tarot cards as a part of worship. How did that happen? Again, worshiping Baal is an exercise in futility because Baal doesn't exist. These tarot cards they're stupid. I'm sorry, if you're a tarot card, it's stupid. It's a mess. At worst, it opens the door for the devil to screw up your life. At best, it tells you about as much as a deck of bicycles could. You're not reading the tea leaves here. You're not looking at animal organs, but it's the same kind of idea, right? Trying to use articles, items to predict the future, control whatever, communicate. How did that happen? What happened to just praying to God in the Spirit and in truth? What happened to doing the thing Jesus taught us to do in prayer? How did that happen? I often say this to pastors that I mentor and to new up-and-coming youth pastors especially. You hear stories about pastors falling from grace and getting busted doing some pretty heinous, messed up things, and you say, how does a pastor end up getting sexually involved with a minor? How does that happen? You're supposed to carry the word of God with you. I'll tell you how it happens. It's one small compromise. And then you make another, and you make another, and over time, the compromise gets really easy. And you justify it. You explain it to yourself. You allowed one little bit of evil to take root in your heart, and then it grew. That's how affairs happen. That's how big issues arise from small issues. Most times when life blows up in somebody's face, it's because they let a little bit of evil in. It's just a little bit. It's not a big deal. It's one compromise. That's how it happens. That's why I felt burdened as I was reading Deuteronomy this week to remind us of something that should be, it's a basic teaching of Christianity. It's very rudimentary. It's very spiritual milk, not spiritual meat stuff. Flee from sin. Don't have sin in your life. Don't welcome it into your house. Again, not talking about people. Just talk about beliefs and practices that weakness your reason. that impair the tenderness of your heart, that obscure your sense of God, that takes your relish off of spiritual things. Whatever increases the strength and authority of your body over your mind, that thing is sin to you, no matter how innocent it seems in and of itself. Don't be led astray. When you read in Hebrews, one of the things that the author of Hebrews says is this: no one can enter the kingdom without holiness. If you're not holy, you're not going to enter. You have to be set apart for God. You have to be purified by God. Now, granted, in James it also says that, and it's actually in Hebrews too, that our great high priest is able to comfort us, understand, and relate to us in our weaknesses. There are moments where we sin and we regret it and we repent, and our great heavenly high priest, Jesus Christ, he goes and makes intercession for us. He wipes the slate clean. It is nailed to the cross. It is gone. It's not your problem anymore. 100%. But I don't think Judas woke up one morning and said, I'm going to betray the Son of God. I think he said, no one will notice if I pinch a little bit of money out of the purse that I'm in charge of. It's just to buy some bread this one time. And then it grows. How much evil do you want in your life? How many seeds do you want to plant in the garden? I'm not calling you to become legalistic. That's one of the things that holiness people have a tendency to do. Oh, I want nothing evil in my life, so I'm going to get rid of everything. Probably a little bit extreme. I'm just asking all of us to pause for a moment, to think about our lives, to look at the things that maybe we've let get a little out of hand, and to put them at the foot of the cross, to make a change, and to live different, to live free, to live without that burden, without that thing coming between you and God, to have that vitality and joy that we love in our experiences with our Father, rather than a sense of shame or of distance or of disappointment or of unworthiness. If there's even a little bit of evil in your life, and you know it's evil, or you look at it and you go, it impairs my reason, but technically there's not a rule about it in the Bible, just kick it out of your life. Get rid of it. It's not worth it. Yes, some things are clear, like hot dog jello. That is evil. But can I just encourage you today? By the will, by the power, and in the name of Jesus Christ, purge the evil that's in your life. Get rid of it. It is not worth it.